Chapter 1. The House on Hollow Creek Road. There is a specific kind of happiness that exists only in the very beginning of things. Not the deep, weathered happiness that comes after years of knowing someone, the kind that has been tested and bent and has held anyway. Not the comfortable happiness of routine and familiarity and the particular piece of a life that has found its shape. This is something else entirely. This is the happiness that lives in the first weeks of a new life, when everything is still possibility and nothing has been complicated yet, and the future stretches out ahead like a road you've never driven, going somewhere you've never been, on a morning when the light is exactly right. Ron Parker was 24 years old, and he was living inside that happiness like a man who understood, on some instinctive level, that it was temporary, not because things would go wrong, but because this particular quality of feeling, this precise combination of newness and love and freedom, was by its nature a thing that existed only at beginnings. And so he was paying attention to it, storing it up. The way you stop and really look at a sunset, not because sunsets are rare, but because you know this specific one, this exact configuration of light and cloud and color, will never happen again. He was paying attention to it on the morning they turned off the state highway onto Hollow Creek Road, Virginia, with everything they owned in the back of a second-hand Ford pickup that had cost them $1,100 and had developed, somewhere around the Tennessee border, a concerning shimmer in the steering wheel that both of them had agreed to stop worrying about until they arrived. Hermione was asleep in the passenger seat. Ron drove and watched the road and let her sleep. Hollow Creek Road was exactly what it sounded like, a two-lane road that followed the line of a creek through a valley between two low, forested ridges in the rural southwestern corner of Virginia. The kind of road that doesn't appear on most GPS systems with full confidence, that requires the occasional manual override and a willingness to trust that the next turn is correct even when the screen says recalculating. The trees on either side were old growth, oak and hickory, and the occasional massive tulip poplar, their canopies reaching toward each other across the road in the particular way of trees that have been growing in the same place for a very long time and have simply decided, by the slow, patient logic of trees, to meet in the middle. It was October. The leaves were going, not gone, but going, the green retreating and the underlying colors emerging, amber and rust, and a deep particular red that Ron had only ever seen in the mountains of Virginia in autumn. The light came through the canopy in long angled shafts, the way light comes through the windows of old churches, and it landed on the road in patches that the truck moved through one after another. Ron had grown up in Charlotte. Traffic and concrete and the specific visual density of a mid-sized American city that never fully empties and never fully quiets. He had not spent significant time in places like this. He was aware, driving down Hollow Creek Road on this October morning, that he was looking at something his eyes didn't entirely have the vocabulary for yet. Something his city-formed brain was receiving and processing with a slight delay. The way you sometimes hear a piece of music in a language you don't speak and understand that it is beautiful without being able to tell anyone why. He thought, "We live here now." The thought arrived with a quality he hadn't anticipated, not excitement exactly, not the adrenaline of a decision made and committed to. Something quieter, something that sat in the chest rather than in the pulse, the particular feeling of a thing being right. He thought, "This is where we're supposed to be." Hermione woke up somewhere in the last mile. The way she always woke up, not gradually, not the slow surfacing that most people do, but all at once, eyes open and present, as if she had simply decided to be awake and her body had complied immediately. She had always been like that. It was one of the first things he had loved about her, the way she inhabited wakefulness completely, without the transitional fog that Ron himself needed 10 minutes and a cup of coffee to clear. She sat up, pushed her dark hair back from her face, and looked out the window. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just looked at the road and the trees and the light coming through the canopy. Then she said, quietly, "Oh." Just that, "oh." Ron looked at her, She was still looking at the trees. There was something in her expression, a softness, an openness, the particular look she had when something caught her in a way she hadn't expected, like she was receiving something. He said, "Yeah." She looked at him, smiled, reached over and put her hand over his on the gear shift. They drove the last mile like that, her hand over his, neither of them speaking. The creek visible occasionally through the trees on the left, catching the light in bright, quick flashes between the trunks. The house appeared at the end of a gravel driveway that turned off the road between two old fence posts. No gate, no mailbox, just the posts and the gravel and the driveway curving gently to the right through a stand of cedar trees that partially obscured the house until you were almost upon it. And then the cedars ended, and there it was. Small was the first word, not in a disappointing way, in the way of something that has found the right scale for itself and settled there comfortably. A 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow, white clapboard with green shutters, a covered front porch running the full width of the facade with 2 wooden chairs on it that the previous owners had apparently left behind. A stone chimney on the south end. A detached shed to the right, barely visible behind a stand of overgrown forsythia. And behind the house, extending back to where the tree line began at the ridge, the backyard, a large, slightly unkempt rectangle of grass and weeds, and one ancient apple tree in the far right corner that still had a few late fruit on it, small and dark red, catching the morning light. Ron stopped the truck at the end of the driveway, and they sat for a moment looking at it. Hermione said, "It's real." He said, "What did you think it was going to be?" She said, "I don't know, I think I kept expecting something to fall through, some reason we couldn't have it." She paused. "We actually have it." He put the truck in park and looked at the house and felt that thing in his chest again, the quietness of something right. "We actually have it," he said. "Let me tell you a little about who these 2 people were before we go any further, because who they were matters for what happened to them. And because people are not just the events that occur to them. They are the specific human beings those events occur to, and the specific human beings determine everything about how the story goes." Ron Parker had grown up in Charlotte, the only child of a father who worked in construction management and a mother who taught 4th grade and had very clear ideas about what a good life looked like. He was a thoughtful, steady, quietly funny person who had learned early that the best way to navigate a world that was frequently louder and more chaotic than he preferred was to become very good at being still inside himself. Not cold. Ron was not cold. He felt things deeply, and he felt them completely. But he had a quality of interior steadiness that people around him had always found calming without necessarily understanding where it came from. He was also, which was relevant to their current situation, the kind of person who committed completely to decisions once he'd made them. He did not second guess. He did not look back. When he had decided at 22 that Hermione was the person he was going to spend his life with, he had known it with the same unambiguous certainty with which he knew that he was left-handed or that he didn't like the taste of cilantro. It was simply a fact about his life that had revealed itself to him, and once revealed, it required no further deliberation. His parents had not agreed. His parents had felt, with the particular certainty of people who love their child and are completely wrong about what's best for him, that 22 was too young, and that Hermione, whom they'd met twice, was too impulsive, and that a young woman who planted things in window boxes and read 3 books at once and had very strong opinions about everything was not the stabilizing influence their son needed. Ron had listened to them carefully, acknowledged their concerns with the genuine respect he felt for both of them, and married Hermione Parker, née Hermione Vasquez, in a small ceremony in a botanical garden in Asheville, North Carolina, attended by 11 friends and not a single family member from either side. His parents had not spoken to him since. Her parents had not spoken to her since. They had each other and 11 friends and a second-hand Ford pickup with a shimmer in the steering wheel, and they had driven away from everything they'd known and turned onto Hollow Creek Road, Virginia, on an October morning, and found a white clapboard house with green shutters at the end of a gravel driveway. And they were, Ron would tell you without hesitation, the happiest he had ever been in his life. Hermione was different from Ron in the ways that mattered, and similar to him in the ways that mattered more. Where Ron was steady, she was kinetic, always in motion, always with three things happening simultaneously, always with her hands in something. She cooked and gardened and built furniture from flat-pack boxes with a focused, physical engagement that was almost meditative. She thought best with her hands occupied. Ron used to watch her knead bread dough or divide seedlings or sand a rough edge of wood and see her arrive at clarity about something completely unrelated. She'd look up from whatever her hands were doing and say, with the sudden focused brightness of a person who has just solved a problem they've been working on for days, "I know what to do about the client presentation," or "I think what I was actually trying to say was," and finish a conversation they'd started 2 days ago. She was perceptive in the way that people who pay close physical attention to the world are perceptive, not analytical, exactly, but receptive. Open. She noticed things. The specific quality of light in a room, the way a space felt when you entered it, the small behavioral tells that told you what someone was actually feeling under what they were saying. She had walked into the house for the first time, walked through every room, running her fingertips along the walls, testing floorboards with her weight, standing in the center of each room and simply feeling it, and then come back to the front porch where Ron was waiting and said, "It's sad, but it's not damaged. Does that make sense?" He'd said it made perfect sense. She'd said, "Something unhappy happened here, but the house isn't carrying it badly. It's like it processed it. Whatever it was, it processed it and it's still standing and it's okay." Ron had looked at the house, then at her. He'd said, "You got all that from touching the walls." She'd said, "Don't be dismissive." He'd said, "I'm not being dismissive. I'm asking a genuine question." She'd considered it. Then she'd said, "I got it from the whole thing, the way it sits, the way the light falls in, the way the floors feel. It's the same way you read a room when you walk into a party. You know within 30 seconds whether it's a good party or a bad party without anyone telling you. Same principle." Ron had nodded slowly. "And this is a good house." Hermione had looked at it for a moment longer. Then, "This is a house that needs someone to be happy in it. It's been waiting." They spent the first day unpacking. It was the good kind of unpacking, the kind that happens when a space is small enough to feel manageable, and the two people doing it are well matched in their approach to it, which Ron and Hermione were. He was systematic, room by room, boxes labeled and placed and dealt with in order. She was instinctive, moving things to where they felt right and adjusting from there, which meant that some things got moved 2 or 3 times, but always ended up exactly correct in a way that pure systematic placement rarely achieved. They worked around each other with the easy physical familiarity of people who have learned each other's rhythms, when to be in the same space, and when to give the other room, when to ask, and when to simply read the situation and act. By 3 in the afternoon, the kitchen was fully set up, and Hermione was making coffee in their own kitchen for the first time. She stood at the counter while the coffee brewed and looked around the room, at the old wooden cabinets and the deep farmhouse sink, and the window above it that looked out over the backyard and the tree line and the first suggestions of evening color in the sky. And she had the expression on her face that Ron had learned to recognize as her particular version of happiness. Not exuberance, Hermione's happiness was not exuberant. It was more like settling, like a thing finding its level. He came into the kitchen, and she handed him a mug without turning around, and he stood beside her, and they both looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. He said, "You're going to tear that whole thing up, aren't you?" She said, "Every square foot." He said, "You're going to have a vegetable garden and an herb garden and some kind of cutting garden," she said, "for flowers. And I want raised beds along the south fence. And I want to do something with that corner by the apple tree. It gets the best afternoon light. I can see it from here." He looked at the corner she meant. The grass was long there, slightly overgrown, the soil dark and dense looking even from this distance. It had that quality that good garden soil has, a richness, a depth of color that spoke of years of organic material breaking down and rebuilding, the slow, patient alchemy of Earth doing what Earth does. Hermione was looking at it with the focused, assessing attention of someone already planning. She said, "That corner is going to be roses." He sipped his coffee. "Of course it is." She looked at him with a smile that was only slightly smug. "You wait." He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. They stood at the kitchen window in the late afternoon light and looked at the backyard that was about to become a garden, and the apple tree in the corner, and the dark, rich soil where the roses were going to grow. He thought, "We live here now." He thought, "This is where we're supposed to be." That first night was, as first nights in new homes go, almost exactly right. They ordered pizza from the one pizza place that delivered to their end of Hollow Creek Road. A 40-minute wait, the woman on the phone had said, which turned out to be 55 minutes, which was fine because they used the extra 15 to find the box with the sheets in it and make the bed, which needed to be done, and which they had both been strategically not thinking about. They ate on the living room floor because the table wasn't set up yet, with the boxes still stacked against the walls, in the particular provisional warmth of a space that is in the process of becoming home without quite being home yet. Ron had found, in one of the boxes, a small portable Bluetooth speaker that he'd been looking for since August, and he connected it to his phone and put on the playlist they'd made together 2 years ago on a road trip. The playlist that had been the backing track of their early relationship, that they'd been adding to and adjusting ever since, that had accumulated in it the particular musical archaeology of their time together, songs from different periods that, if you knew them well, told a fairly complete story. Hermione lay on her back on the living room floor with her head propped on a couch cushion and her pizza balanced on her chest, and listened to the music with her eyes half closed. Ron watched her. She said, without opening her eyes fully, "Stop looking at me." He said, "I'm not looking at you." She said, "You're definitely looking at me." He said, "I'm looking at the room." She opened one eye, looked at him, looked at the room, looked back at him. "You are categorically not looking at the room," she said. He smiled. "I'm looking at you in the room." She considered this as a distinction. Then she closed her eye again and smiled at the ceiling. "Fine," she said. "That's acceptable." They went to bed late. The bedroom was mostly set up, bed made, bedside tables in place, the lamp that had been Hermione's since college on her side casting its particular warm light. The window faced east, toward the ridge, and through it came the sounds of the valley at night, the creek, somewhere in the dark below the road, running over its stones. The wind in the oak canopy. The intermittent calling of something in the tree line that Ron couldn't identify and Hermione said was probably a barred owl. Ron lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of the valley and felt the particular physical exhaustion of a day of moving and unpacking. The satisfying bone-deep tiredness of the body that has done real work and is now done and knows it. Hermione was already close to sleep beside him. He could tell by her breathing, the specific deceleration of it, the way it evened out and deepened. He lay there for a while longer, listening to the creek, listening to the owl, feeling the unfamiliar quality of the dark, darker than the dark he was used to, deeper and more complete, the dark of a place where the nearest streetlight was several miles away, and the sky above the ridge was the kind of sky you forget exists until you're somewhere that still has it. He thought about his parents, briefly, without pain, just the fact of them, the distance, the choice that had been made and what it had cost and what it had given. He thought about Hermione's parents, who he'd met 4 times and who were decent people operating from fear that presented itself as disappointment. He thought about the 11 friends at the wedding in Asheville and the way the day had felt small but complete, the way the house was small but complete. He thought, we made it. He turned on his side toward Hermione. She was asleep, completely, peacefully, deeply asleep, Her face relaxed in the particular absolute way it relaxed in sleep that Ron had spent 2 years learning, and that still occasionally stopped him. He watched her sleep for a moment, then he closed his eyes. He was almost asleep when he felt it. A warmth, coming from somewhere beneath him, not the warmth of the mattress, not body heat, not the ordinary warmth of a bed occupied by 2 people. Something else, something from below, from the floor through the mattress into the bed. A warmth that pulsed very slightly, the way warmth from a living thing pulses. He lay still and felt it. It lasted for perhaps 30 seconds. Then it was gone, replaced by the ordinary temperature of the room, the ordinary coolness of an October night in a mountain valley. He lay still for another minute. Then he told himself it was the floor. Old houses had radiant qualities, absorbed heat through the day and released it at night. There was nothing strange about a warm floor. He told himself this. He almost believed it. He fell asleep listening to the creek and the owl and the wind in the oak canopy, and the house settled around them with the small sounds that old houses make. The creaks and pops and subsonic sighs of a structure accommodating itself to the temperature, to the season, to the new weight and warmth of the people it had taken in. The house was quiet. The backyard was dark. In the far right corner, by the apple tree, where the soil was dark and dense and rich, where the light would be good in the afternoons, where Hermione had looked through the kitchen window and decided, with the certainty of a person whose instincts were almost always right, where she had said the roses were going to grow. The soil moved. Just slightly, just a settling, the kind of infinitesimal subsidence that soil does when something beneath it shifts, or breathes, or, after a very long time of waiting, recognizes that the waiting is nearly over. The apple tree stood in the dark above it, branches bare, the last few small red fruits hanging still in the windless night. The creek ran on in the dark below the road. The owl called once more from the tree line, and then was silent. And the house, the small white clapboard house at the end of the gravel driveway on Hollow Creek Road, that Hermione had said was sad but not damaged, that had been waiting for someone to be happy in it, settled around its new occupants with a sigh that was almost gentle, almost welcoming.